every major city in Europe offers its own unique history and heritage, and an array of cultural delights guaranteed to draw holidaymakers from across the globe. But for those looking for fine architecture, a world-renowned art scene, and a musical heritage beyond compare, all gathered together in one stunning location, a place that really should be at the top of anybody's wish list is the wonderful city of Vienna. Here you can wander in the footsteps of emperors and empresses and explore the cobbled streets and magnificent palaces of a city which was once the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. From breathtaking cathedrals and exquisite statues to a host of treasures hidden amongst its meandering streets, this city is bursting with elegance and beauty, and it's easy to see why it once drew artists, scholars and musicians from all over Europe, inspiring the likes of Mozart and Strauss to compose some of their greatest musical masterpieces. Vienna is literally glittering with beautiful sights, and this portrait of a city will give you just a taste of the rich history and culture on offer here. By the time we've finished our journey, you'll be left in no doubt as to why Vienna was once regarded the cultural capital of the continent. Although Vienna is today a thriving modern capital with a burgeoning population of almost 2 million, its beginnings were rather more humble. Back in 500 BC, it was nothing more than a small Celtic settlement huddled on the edge of the river Danube. Over the centuries, the Romans and Byzantines would contribute to the growth of the settlement, but it wasn't until the 13th century, when the first of the Habsburg dynasties began their reign, that the city really took shape. As wealth and prosperity flowed in, Vienna was soon transformed into the magnificent capital of the Holy Roman Empire and of Austria itself. Today, the city is filled with cultural buildings and imperial monuments, reminding us of Vienna's glory days. And where better to begin our journey through the city than at the Hofburg Imperial Palace, which was once the very seat of the Habsburg Empire. This sprawling complex began its days as a medieval castle, but after 600 years of Habsburg rule and constant expansion and improvements, it now covers a vast area, which includes 18 courtyards, 19 wings, and well over 2,000 rooms. Most people start their exploration of this fascinating collection of buildings from the Michael Wing, which faces the centre of Vienna and dates back to the 19th century. Its curved facade, crowned by stunning domed roofs, create a fitting entrance for an area which has housed the most powerful people in Austria since the 13th century. The square and streets outside, meanwhile, are rich with splendid architecture, statues and fountains, and still resonate with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, just as they would have many centuries ago. The Hofburg is very much more than a palace, however, and if, on entering, you resist the temptation to pause for too long in the various squares, you'll find two impressive structures to the southwest of this imperial area, which have become an important part of Viennese culture. Following the enlargement of Vienna after the demolition of its city walls in the 1860s, the Hofburg had its last great expansion, and this included the construction of twin museums, which were to serve as flanks to a museum forum. Although this imperial forum was never completed, the museums of art history and natural history house an array of delights gathered by the Habsburgs over the centuries. The Kunsthistorisches Museum is, in fact, the fourth largest art gallery in the world. Inside, you'll find a wonderful collection of artwork, including masterpieces by Bruegel and Vermeer. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the square, Vienna's Natural History Museum offers an exciting array of rare fossils, dinosaurs, and prehistoric art. For those in search of something rather more contemporary, you'll be pleased to discover that one of the largest cultural areas in the world, Vienna's Museum Quartier, lies a stone's throw away from the twin museums. You could literally spend days in this 60,000 square metre district, which includes modern art museums, centres for dance, music halls, and wonderful spaces for open-air events. Every single museum has something unique to offer, so the best advice has to be to follow your own personal taste and give yourself as much time as possible to make the most of the area. But now it's time to have a break from perusing through museums and artwork and go in search of the much older inner city of Vienna, and you'll soon find out that the architecture here is just as breathtaking as the paintings hung in the city's galleries. The truly beautiful Stephansdom, or St. Stephen's Cathedral, is regarded as the soul of the city by the locals, and when you wander around the outside of this stunning building, it's easy to see why. The incredible mosaic roof is made up of 250,000 separate glazed tiles, which were restored after a fire tore through the building during the Second World War. The cathedral has in fact become a symbol of endurance throughout the ages, having experienced the ravages of various invaders ever since the 9th century, when it's thought that the first church stood here. St. Stephen's Cathedral has been embellished constantly over the years, and everywhere you look there are yet more wonderful details to see, from the fine stonework to the sculptured reliefs. And if you have the energy to climb the 246 steps to the observation platform, you'll be rewarded with a breathtaking view of the roof and the capital city far below. After the splendour of Stephansdom, a quiet stroll down the narrow lanes to the street of Domgasse will bring you to a much more modest part of the city, and at number 5 you'll come upon the rather unassuming yet culturally important Figarohaus. The name of this house may have already given you a clue as to who originally resided here between 1784 and 87. If you haven't already guessed, we have of course found a Viennese location which is significant because of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart is probably the most well-known composer of classical music from all time. And in the 18th century, the theatres and opera houses of Europe were filled with his elegant symphonies and passionate operas. Although brought up in Salzburg as a child prodigy, he was adored by the Habsburgs and was frequently called upon to play for the Empress Maria Theresa and her entourage. Not surprisingly, as a young man, Mozart moved to Vienna, and within the very walls of this house he spent the happiest days of his life and wrote some of his most beautiful music, including of course the Marriage of Figaro. Soaking in the atmosphere around the Figarohaus is fascinating, and if you have the time, you'll find that the first floor has now been turned into a delightful museum, where you'll discover Mozart's own story is as captivating as the music he wrote. Don't linger here too long, however, as there are still many more Viennese landmarks to be seen, and a few minutes' walk from Mozart's Figarohaus will take you to the Hoher Markt, where you'll find another important symbol of this lovely city. The magnificent anchor clock was designed in 1911 by the much-loved artist Franz von Matsch and forms part of a bridge between the two parts of the Anchor Insurance Company. During the course of the day, 12 important historical figures move across the clock face, and their fine metalwork and vibrant colours make this a particularly unique piece of work. If you'd like to delve a little deeper into the history of the city, wander on a little further north of the Hoher Markt, where you'll find yourself in the narrow streets of Vienna's old Jewish district. Here, along the tangle of cobbled lanes, you get an evocative sense of Vienna's past, especially if you stumble into the tiny Ruprecht Square. Tucked away behind the bars and restaurants stands Vienna's oldest surviving church, named after the patron saint of salt merchants, St. Rupert. Ruprechtskirche dates back to the 11th century, and at the foot of its stone tower you can see the saint himself holding a tub of salt, which would have been a much treasured commodity in the Middle Ages. Outside the enclosed square, the cobbled streets are filled with reminders of a once bustling Jewish ghetto. At the heart of the district lies the main square Judenplatz, which stands testament to the resilience of the Austrian Jews throughout the ages. The Holocaust Memorial is located here and is a unique monument commemorating the Austrian Jews killed during World War II. Carved with stylized library shelves, this memorial represents the scholarly tradition of the Jews, and it certainly serves as a poignant reminder of one of the sadder episodes in Viennese history. It's impossible to go far in Vienna without the legacy of World War II being evident, and a short walk from Judenplatz will take you to the city's old town hall, which now houses a museum dedicated to the Austrian resistance. The archives held here give a fascinating insight into the Austrian struggle during the war, and the building itself, with its combination of medieval and Baroque architecture, boasts some truly impressive features. We've now reached the halfway point in our journey, but there's still a great deal more to be seen in Vienna, and for the next chapter in our adventure through the Austrian capital, it's time to step back to an age when the Habsburg Empire was truly flourishing, as we venture into some of Vienna's most elegant buildings. We've only just begun to touch on the wonders of this extraordinary city, and if you take a trip to the outskirts of the capital, you'll be greeted with one of the most important cultural monuments in Austria. It's been said that the beauty of the Schönbrunn Palace surpasses that of the Palace of Versailles in Paris, and this much-loved summer residence of the Habsburgs, dating back to the 16th century, has a great many tales to tell. Empress Maria Theresa spent the summers here in the 18th century, with her huge royal entourage numbering over 1,500 people. To mention her husband, Francis I, 5 sons and 11 daughters, the youngest of which went on to become the most notorious and last ever Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. As you enter the palace, you'll certainly get a taste of the extravagance enjoyed by the imperial family, and your eyes will be drawn heavenwards to the most stunning of Italian frescoes, which is only the beginning of a truly mesmerizing journey through Vienna's regal past. The palace has 1,441 rooms and halls, and perhaps one of the most breathtaking of all is the Great Gallery, which is one of the most lavishly decorated dining halls you could possibly imagine. Its walls are adorned with beautiful white and gold stucco decoration and elegant crystal mirrors, while glittering chandeliers hang from its richly painted ceiling, making this one of the most magnificent Rococo interiors in existence. Each room holds its own special story, and if you venture into the nearby Rosa rooms, named after Joseph Rosa, the landscape artist who decorated them, you'll discover that this is where 6-year-old Mozart sat at the piano to play for Empress Maria Theresa for the very first time. If you can possibly draw yourself away from the sumptuous halls and chambers, you'll find the gardens surrounding the palace are just as splendid as the sights on the interior. Every pathway leads to a new location, and from the fabulous mock Roman ruin to a 19th century palm house full of exotic plants, there are a host of treasures to be discovered here. You'll certainly need at least a day to enjoy Schönbrunn Palace and its gardens, but sadly, with so many more sights to see, it's now time to head back into the heart of the city, where we'll discover that despite the affluence of Austria's emperors and empresses, Vienna has had to battle through some difficult times down through the ages. Crowded and densely built, many centuries ago, the city's inhabitants were a prime target for disease, and in the Great Plague of 1679, around 30,000 people lost their lives. Throughout Vienna, you'll find many plague columns, like this one, outside the beautiful Maria True Kirche in Josefstadt, which are a permanent memorial to all those who died and a fascinating part of Vienna's history. When plague struck the population again in 1713, the emperor of the day, Charles VI, vowed to build a church if Vienna was spared from another epidemic. True to his word, when the city recovered, he began work on a spectacular church dedicated to the patron saint and protector against the plague, Saint Borromeo. St. Charles Church, or Karlskirche, named after the emperor, is without doubt the most magnificent Baroque church in Vienna. It was built by the architect responsible for the Schönbrunn Palace, Fischer von Erlach. Borrowing architectural inspiration from Greece, Rome and the Orient, Erlach created a truly eclectic masterpiece, and although he died before completing the church, it was finally finished by his son in 1737. The spiralling friezes that wrap ribbon-like around the two towers feature events from the life of Saint Borromeo. And if you look to the top of the main entrance, you'll see Lorenzo Mattielli's wonderful statue of the saint himself. It took 21 years to build the church. Unfortunately, once Saint Borromeo had taken his place as protector of the city, Vienna was never to suffer from the plague again. The bustling modern-day Vienna is a far cry from the tragedies that befell the population in years gone by. Just 5 minutes to the west of Karlsplatz and Karlkirche, you'll find yourself in an area which is buzzing with energy. The Nachtmarkt is Vienna's busiest market, and with an array of shops and stalls to explore, visitors to the city will find it a fascinating experience. All manner of produce is on sale, and for anyone in search of souvenirs to take home, it's definitely the perfect destination. As dusk falls over the city, and the Viennese gather in bars and restaurants to wind down after a busy day, for the city traveller, this is the perfect opportunity to see some of the sights that really come to life as night draws in. Vienna sparkles with beauty as buildings are lit up for onlookers to admire, and you'll be dazzled by the impressive architecture towering over the city streets. To the west of Vienna, the intricately carved towers of the new City Hall reach into the sky to create a truly memorable sight, rivaling any other modern government building in Europe. Meanwhile, opposite, the beautiful semicircular facade of the Burgtheater is just as splendid, and with its fine frescoes and statues, there are few buildings that can rival its opulence. Vienna is certainly the place to be if you enjoy theatre and music, and if you prefer a night of opera rather than a play at the Burgtheater, there's a wonderful 19th century opera house to the south of the city. Should you be in the mood for good old-fashioned fun rather than a night of high culture, however, then Prater Park is definitely the place to go. On the outskirts of the city, you'll find one of the best equipped amusement parks in Europe, filled with sideshows, shooting galleries and merry-go-rounds, and the giant Ferris wheel has been providing visitors with amazing views of Vienna since 1897. The Ferris wheel has come to symbolise the city of Vienna for many people. But there's another Viennese character who we have yet to make the acquaintance of, who's perhaps an even greater symbol of the Austrian capital. The gentleman in question is none other than Johann Strauss, the man responsible for the beautiful Blue Danube Waltz, who, unlike Mozart, was actually born in Vienna, and a visit to Stadtpark will bring you into the presence of the man himself, or rather, a delightful bronze statue to be more precise. Framed by a marble relief, this was unveiled in 1921 and has proved to be one of the most photographed sights in all of Vienna ever since. It does of course help that Strauss's statue is located in such a beautiful park, and if you have the time to explore, this really is a wonderful place to unwind. As our time exploring Vienna is drawing to a close, there's every possibility that the best has been left until last. Situated at the southeastern end of the city, you'll find the stunning palaces and gardens of the Belvedere. Originally built as a summer residence for Prince Eugene of Savoy, one of the greatest generals ever to serve the Habsburgs. It will of course come as no surprise that such an important man was rewarded with the comforts of a glorious summer residence, and with many grand rooms and extensive gardens. The palaces, the Upper Belvedere and the Lower Belvedere, are together considered to be one of the world's finest Baroque landmarks. The palace's beautifully decorated rooms are filled with unimaginable delights, and in the Upper Belvedere, even the reception area is wonderful to see, complete with 4 Herculean figures bowing beneath the splendour of a ceiling positively alive with friezes and stucco. Climbing the ceremonial staircase adorned in rich stucco work will bring you to the upper floor, which houses an array of elaborately decorated rooms, not to mention the greatest treasures of all, a selection of paintings by Gustav Klimt, one of Austria's best-loved artists. The Kiss is without doubt Klimt's most famous painting, and arguably one of the most romantic pictures of all time. And gazing at the lovers on the canvas, embellished with burnished, multi-coloured geometric shapes and swirls, it's easy to understand why. The world's largest collection of art by Klimt is housed within the grand rooms of the Upper Belvedere, as well as a remarkable selection of masterpieces by many other notable artists. There are still more stunning sights to be seen in the Lower Palace, and although you won't find the splendid artwork of the Upper Belvedere here, it really has some fabulous rooms to explore, providing a fascinating insight into Baroque interior design. From the statues of the Marble Hall to the mirrored walls of the Golden Room, the sights are magnificent, and a true testament to the tireless work that's gone into conserving these palaces, making them such an important landmark in this unforgettable city. Sadly, this brings us to the end of our magical journey through Vienna, and after wandering through magnificent palaces and gardens, retracing the steps of world-famous composers, and exploring the vast array of wonderful buildings, museums and monuments here, Austria's capital will have undoubtedly cast its captivating spell around you, ensuring that you'll be tempted to return another day. We have, of course, only seen just a brief glimpse of the fabulous treasures to be found in Vienna. And with so much more to be explored, The one thing you can be absolutely certain of is the fact that you will never be disappointed or ever tire of visiting this truly remarkable city.